I think it's been clear for a long time, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's a push to onboard everyone to a digital ID system. Vaccine passports during COVID were a big part of this. But there's been all sorts of pushes for it. For example, WorldCoin. Sam Altman, scan your eyeball, get a unique digital ID in a wallet you can have tokens in. People in the global south that they're basically being bribed to give up their biometric data for the guy that runs OpenAI with Microsoft and stuff. These digital ID initiatives are consistently tested on vulnerable stateless people, but the goal is to have it rolled out globally and to have it be interfaced with a digital wallet where the money is programmable and surveillable. So a lot of people have been talking about CBDCs, central bank issued digital currency. But there's also going to be digital currencies just as surveillable and programmable that are issued by the private sector and the Wall Street banks. And that isn't being talked about enough. Right. So one of the stable coins I mentioned earlier that people in Argentina are being rapidly onboarded to because their currency is being destroyed, Tether recently onboarded the FBI and Secret Service to its platform.
Jesus.
So everyone that uses Tether gets to use their money under the watchful eye of American intelligence, essentially. And those same actors, the FBI and the Secret Service, are part of this public-private partnership housed within the World Economic Forum. It's basically U.S., Israeli, and U.K. intelligence, plus a lot of big banks and PayPal. Their ambition is to end online anonymity, and with that, also financial anonymity. So we're seeing unprecedented crackdowns, financial privacy tools, both for cryptocurrency and for regular transactions, and big pushes from all across the internet, really, to have you tie your government issued ID to what you do online, whether it's your social media account or really anything. And so the goal here is to have, create a completely surveillable system based on biometrics and with money that the government or whoever can directly program and surveil. So programming it means that you can only use the money for what they say you can use it for, and you can only send it to who they say you can send it to.
So,
in all of
so
that.
If people, are having a hard time wrapping their heads around this, so what this is they're just going to make it easier to do to everybody what they did to the trucker protest in Canada. And
yeah, I think a lot of that was, trials to see how much pushback they'll actually get for this kind of stuff. I mean, the goal is to onboard the whole world onto that. And they consistently test this stuff first in a global south. On the global south. So what this article is about is a big effort to essentially wrap up a significant amount of Latin America by focusing at the subnational level, the local level, onto these kinds of systems under the guise of we must decarbonize now.
Yeah.
But really if you look at sort of the fine print, I guess you could say, of this program, the decarbonization funds go toward a specific company that's tied up with this particular group that's trying to build an intercontinental power smart grid from the Americas, and they've been testing their smart grid in poor communities in Latin America, in Los Angeles, actually, in the U.S., and also in Colombia and some other countries, with the idea of having it all tied together and having energy be currency. And the idea is to move away from currency as we know it now and have all these commodity-backed currencies, and that people trade energy or trade carbon credits. And basically, it's complicated. There's a lot of different reasons for why they're moving in that direction. Part of it is because of the insane amount of debt that the world is saddled with. You have to park that debt in certain places. You have to find ways to manage it, right? And so, some of these stable coins are being used for that. Carbon credits are being used for that. Actually, RFK's vice president, Nicole Shanahan, was running or managing a project at Stanford Law that was about using carbon credits to facilitate quantitative easing, which is, the endless money printing by the Federal Reserve. So there's been a lot of, efforts to look at what they're going to do with the debt. And essentially they have to remake the financial system. But they're, making it in a way where it's, completely surveillable and controllable. And these are really the ambitions that the U.S. national security state had right after 9/11 and tried to impose on everybody. Total information awareness, for example. was a program that they tried to enact. There was a big uproar about it at the time in like 2003, 2004, because even the New York Times and stuff knew that it was going to completely eliminate privacy for the average American. The ambition of this program was to surveil literally everything, including people's like health signals, to prevent pandemics before they can happen. To prevent financial crime before it can happen.
Yeah.
To prevent
Pre-crime.
terrorist attacks before it can happen. It's pre-crime.
Pre-crime.
And Total Information Awareness was recreated as a private company in 2004, right after Congress defunded it. And it's provably Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's company that contracts to every single U.S. intelligence agency. They privatized it because they realized if they can frame it as a private company, people won't complain. People will give their data freely to the private company. So Peter Thiel doesn't just make Palantir, he also makes Facebook. And they build this network of companies. And now Palantir for years has been testing predictive policing in urban communities in the United States, really testing it all over the world now. A whole lot of stuff going on with carbon credits and carbon markets right now. And it's a very murky legal area. And I'm very concerned about it because there's this whole mentioned but relatively unexplored issue of so-called carbon rights, where the person that buys the carbon credit can get rights to the carbon in the forest the credit represents. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like, I buy a carbon credit in this forest, this Colombian rainforest, and now I am potentially the owner of the carbon in those trees, so I can decide what happens to that carbon. And the people that actually like own the land, or like Colombians, they don't necessarily own it anymore, potentially. This is like this murky gray area, so it's opening the way up, I think, to some land grabs in the global south. So a lot of very disturbing things happening in carbon market land, and even under the idea of, reducing CO2 levels and all of that. The carbon market, as it's been functioning, just hasn't done that. It's been criticized by people on the left and the right. And then there's been time and time again, it's been revealed by even mainstream media that up to 90% of all carbon credits on the market right now are completely worthless and meaningless. So it's basically like the junk bond scandal of the 1980s again. And what's interesting is that the person that invented carbon markets and carbon credit trading is a guy named Richard Sander, who worked at Drexel Burnham Lambert, the junk bond scandal bank of the 1980s. He was a senior vice president until he was brought in by the George Bush Sr. administration to apply free markets to environmental issues for Bush Sr.'s EPA, and then was contacted by this like Rockefeller oligarch guy who was at the UN named Maurice Strong to develop the same solution for carbon. And he's also the father of derivatives of financial futures, which of course helped explode in 2008. So the guy that invented all of that is the guy that invented carbon credit trading, and he also wants to make a market just like that for free water and free air, so you can, get basically taxed on that too. So essentially what's happening is that the goal of this is to have all of these localities in Latin America essentially monetize their protected areas by turning it into carbon credits that will be managed by this group of organizations and companies, not the municipalities themselves, and they'll be allowed to receive some money that these carbon credits generate. But they're not the ones actually managing it, the local governments that are signing on and lending their protected areas to the production of these carbon credits. And basically part of the plan here is to have all of these protected areas, or essentially, really these entire municipalities, if you look at what some of the people in the press releases say, by the satellite firm, which is chaired by Steve Mnuchin, Trump's Treasury Secretary, who's now deeply involved in Israeli intelligence front companies like Cybereason, Trump's Joint Chief of Staff, Joe Dunford, also on the board. Argentina's richest man, Marcos Galperin, who runs Mercado Libre, which is deeply, deeply tied up with PayPal and the so-called PayPal mafia, which includes people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all of these guys, which are also making big plays in Argentina right now under Javier Milei. And essentially,
I saw, by the way,
satellite company. Oh, sorry.
I did see Elon Musk tweet out that the place to invest is Argentina. Right now, he's all into. So he's in bed with Milei, the new president there, right?
They're quite cozy. Yes. Well, part of that is because Elon Musk is very desperate for lithium, for Tesla related reasons. And Argentina sits on the lithium triangle with Bolivia and Chile. And so Milei has essentially given a large amount of lithium already to Israel or an Israeli company, and presumably Musk is seeking some of that lithium as well. And he's also attempted to do that in Chile. From those people on the board of the satellite company, the people that created that company are Argentinians, but they're former contractors to U.S. intelligence, to the NSA, to DARPA, the Pentagon, and they're directly partnered with Peter Thiel's Palantir, a contractor for the CIA. And that was created with InQtel money, and also Elon Musk's SpaceX, which is tied up with Space Force, an intelligence and military agency, which Peter Thiel is also tied up with. So under the guise of saving the planet, this intelligence, essentially like front company, the satellite firm with all these like predatory Trump guys on the board, like Steve Mnuchin, who should have been prosecuted for like the 2008 financial crisis, but wasn't by Kamala, is on the board of this, and they're like allowed to spy on these areas in Latin America under the guise of protecting it. We're going to be seeing going forward this push to have economically destabilized countries in Latin America turn towards dollar denominated stable coins. Like that's happening in Argentina, for example, because of like the issues with the peso there and how it's been devalued so much, even under Milei. People are flocking to dollars essentially, but like stable coins, either like Tether USDT or Circle's USDC. And this whole crypto ecosystem in Argentina is pretty much, largely managed by this one particular network that's intimately tied to the satellite company I was talking about. They're all tied up with this group called Endeavor, which Endeavor has an Argentina branch. They have branches really all over the world. They're based in the United States. Their board is chaired by Edgar Bronfman Jr. of the Bronfman family, which, if you're familiar with my books, is intimately tied to organized crime and basically the people behind Justin Trudeau. And another person on their board is Reid Hoffman, who's the co-founder of LinkedIn, who was a member, part of the so-called PayPal mafia. And probably the closest person in Silicon Valley to Jeffrey Epstein.